Hey guys, it's Michelle with Next Chapter Counseling here. This week I decided to address a common question that I get from clients when we start working together because I specialize in relationship issues in my private practice. I get a lot of clients who come to see me when they've gone through a breakup and they're trying to heal and recover from it. And one of the most common questions that I get when they start to see me is wondering if they're basically going through normal breakup symptoms or if they're actually experiencing something more serious, like experiencing depression. So I wanted to make a video today to basically talk about the difference between those two things, to really shed some light on when does what would be kind of, I guess, typical grieving symptoms cross the line into an actual mental health diagnosis of depression. Because really, whenever we experience any kind of loss, whether it's from a breakup or a death or whatever it is, it's normal for us to feel down for a little while and to maybe struggle with some things. But there are some key differences between what is considered in the realm of normal with grief and loss versus depression. So I'm going to go through and talk about that today. Basically, to start off, I want to go over what the criteria is for depression. So what I pulled out today is my little DSM-5 book. So for those of you who don't know what the DSM is, it stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's a big name, and it's kind of the therapist's Bible when it comes to diagnosis. This is my little mini version, but there's a huge book that goes over all the different mental health disorders that we've classified. So a lot of psychiatrists and medical doctors and lots of people in the mental health field went into making up this book. So I want to make it clear that I'm not talking about criteria today that, like, I, Michelle, think is criteria for depression. This is what's decided in a book that's used by clinicians all over the country and really all over the world. So really, if you were to go into any therapist's office, this is the criteria they would look at for determining if you meet enough criteria for a diagnosis of depression. So that's what I'm looking at. And I also want to make sure that I use this because there's 9 different criteria, and I want to make sure I don't accidentally leave one of them out. Even though I'm pretty familiar with it, I just want to make sure I cover my bases today. So the very first thing that you want to look at when it comes to depression is how long have you had a change in your mood? How long have you been feeling down, blue, sad, hopeless, like whatever word fits for you? How long has that been going on? And the first criteria that we're looking at for a diagnosis of depression is that that's been there for at least 2 weeks, nearly every day. So basically, for 2 weeks straight, you've had a noticeable change in your mood. That's the very first thing that we're looking at, is that 2-week marker. That's really important here to keep in mind. Now, there's lots of other things that go along with this. Out of this list of 9 things that I'm going to talk about, that's the first one, is that you had a noticeable change in your mood for 2 weeks. But you need to have 5 of these things out of these 9 to meet criteria for a diagnosis of depression. So as I go through this list, really be thinking about, okay, have I been meeting at least half of these things? It doesn't matter which 5 necessarily, but just checking in to see if you've experienced any of these other things. And all these other criteria that I'm about to talk about, it's also important that you've been experiencing these for 2 weeks in addition to that depressed mood, and looking at that as part of, okay, determining if I'm depressed or not. So the next one is having less interest in things that you usually enjoy. So let's say you're normally a pretty social person, you like to go out with your friends. Well, you're just not feeling that. You don't want to go out with anybody. Let's say you like to read. You don't feel like picking up a book. This is kind of what we mean too, of like, this can also interfere with, like, you're not going to work, or you're not in your usual routine doing the typical things that you do. You're just not interested in it, or it feels like too much work. So that's the second criteria. The third one is having a significant change in your appetite to the point where you're gaining or losing weight. And again, within a 2-week period, if you see a significant weight loss or weight gain, that can be concerning. People can go really either way. Some people, when they're depressed, they do not feel like touching food. Nothing sounds good to them and they're barely eating. Other people, they're eating far more than usual, typically more junk food. So it can go either way, but if you've had a noticeable change in your appetite that's affected your weight, that's another criteria. The fourth one out of the 9 here is changes in your sleep. So again, this can go either way. Some people, when they're depressed, they're sleeping for like 14 hours a day. Like they're sleeping far more than usual. Some people, they just can't get to sleep at all. They're lucky if they're getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. So again, it can go either way, but if your sleep has shifted for a 2-week period, that's a concern. The next one, I kind of call this a moving through mud feeling. The technical term is psychomotor retardation. It's a big, long, fancy psychology term. But really what it means is that you feel slowed down. Things take you longer than usual. You just feel like you're moving in slow motion, or like I said, moving through mud. When I tend to ask clients that seems to fit for them. I'm like, yes, I just feel like everything just takes more effort. The other flip side of this is called psychomotor agitation, which can look like restlessness. So maybe you feel like you can't sit still. Again, it's interesting how depression can look such different, unique ways, but if you've been experiencing either one of those for 2 weeks, that's the 5th criteria. The 6th one, which probably won't come as a surprise to anybody, is feeling fatigued or like you just don't have energy. So whether you've been sleeping a lot or sleeping very little, whether you've been eating a lot or eating very little, whether you've been restless or moving through mud, like just feeling fatigued and tired during the day is the 6th criteria. The 7th is feeling worthless or feeling excessive guilt for things that are not really your fault. So really your self-esteem just taking a huge nosedive to where you're just having a hard time feeling good about yourself is what that one's talking about. The 8th one is having a hard time concentrating or feeling really indecisive. So this would be like you're watching a TV show or movie and you just are not concentrating on anything that's happening. This could also look like having a hard time remembering things, like forgetting things more easily than usual. So that can be another thing that comes along with depression. And the final one, the 9th one, which I would argue is a clear sign that you're experiencing depression more than any of these other signs, is if you're having thoughts of suicide. If you're thinking that you would just be better off dead, then it's important that you seek some help for that. I'm going to put in the comments the National Suicide Hotline number so you can reach out to them if you need support. But that's a clear sign that you've crossed the line from, okay, yeah, I'm going through a breakup and I feel kind of sucky about it, to, okay, I'm really struggling with my mental health if I'm having thoughts of suicide. So those are the 9 criteria. And so again, we're looking for a diagnosis of depression to be meeting 5 of those. Now, what's the difference between that and normal breakup stuff? Because some of these things, as you're probably listening to me talk about them, are really common things that people experience after a breakup. Feelings of worthlessness, like your self-esteem taking a plunge, that's really common. It's also common to maybe have your appetite change, to have your sleep change. It's normal to maybe feel down or sad for a while. You're grieving. But this is where I see some key differences. So the first thing that I normally see is that people who are going through a breakup are typically not experiencing 5 out of those 9. They may be experiencing 2, 3, or 4 of those things, but 5, most of the time, not. The other thing that I normally see, even if they are experiencing, let's say, 5 or more of those things, they're typically not experiencing them for 2 weeks straight. Don't get me wrong, it can take months to heal from a breakup. Like, it can be a long, slow process to feel like you're actually over this person. But typically what you see is within the first 2 weeks after the breakup, someone's really down for a couple days, or they're really down for like a week. But typically, by the time the end of that 2 week period is coming, they're starting to look up. They're starting to get better. It doesn't mean they're back to normal necessarily, but maybe their sleep is readjusting. Maybe they're back on a normal eating pattern again. Like, they're starting to get their life somewhat back to normal, even if they're still thinking about their ex a lot or grieving. So that's kind of what I start to see. It's pretty rare within the realms of a normal breakup for somebody to be experiencing 5 or more of these things for 2 weeks or longer. If somebody's experiencing depression, when this 2 week period comes along, again, you're not going to really see any change or improvement within that 2 week marker that we're talking about. Things are going to stay the same, or things may actually start to get worse for the person as the weeks go on. And it's also common for people to experience depression, unfortunately, for much longer than 2 weeks. 3 or 4 weeks is not uncommon for a depressive episode. So, whereas you start to see it within the realms of normal breakup stuff, where someone starts to get a little better, towards the end of that 2 week period, if not before, you're going to see it with someone with depression that they may almost be doing worse after those 2 weeks have passed. So those are some of the key differences that I look for, and hopefully that helps shed some light on it for yourself so you can decide, okay, yep, I'm just going through a breakup, I'm grieving, yeah, I'm experiencing some of these things, but I haven't been experiencing them for 2 weeks straight. I have it for like a couple days here, and then I feel okay, and then a couple days there. Or if it really helps you know that, like, yeah, I'm struggling with something real and genuine where I need the support of someone else. So I'm also going to put a link in the comments, or in the description section, I guess I should say, for Psychology Today. So Psychology Today is a very popular therapist directory in the United States. It's the most common one that people use to help them find a therapist. So if you've recognized after listening to this video that you do think you're struggling with depression, whether it's related to a breakup or whether it's something that you realize, whoa, that's been there for me for a long time, this is the way for you to start finding yourself a therapist who can help you through it. If you have a question for me, email it to me, nextchapter.michelle@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody.